The night was cold, and the small village at the edge of the forest was silent. The wind moved through the old trees like a whisper, and the stars shined above like silver eyes watching the earth. Far away from the warm houses, a figure lay alone on the ground. She was not human. Her skin carried a faint glow, pale blue under the moonlight, and strange marks ran across her arms as if light itself was flowing through her veins. She was an alien child, weak, broken, and left behind. The villagers had seen her earlier that evening. Hunters returning from the woods had found her collapsed near the old river path. They had stood around her, afraid and unsure. Some called her a demon. Others said she was a bad sign from the skies. Nobody wanted to help. Fear was stronger than pity, and so they turned away, leaving her on the cold earth. By nightfall, she was forgotten, like a shadow that did not belong to their world. But not everyone in the village had a heart made of stone. In a small wooden house near the edge of the forest, an old man named Elias sat by his fire. His hair was white, his hands rough from years of work, but his eyes still carried warmth. He lived alone, for his family had long passed away and silence was his only companion. That night, as the wind howled through the cracks of his home, he thought he heard something else, a faint cry like the sound of a child calling for help. At first, Elias told himself it was nothing. The forest made many strange sounds at night, but the cry came again, softer, weaker, almost breaking. His chest tightened. No cry like that should be ignored. Taking his lantern and wrapping a blanket around his shoulders, he stepped outside into the biting wind. The forest seemed darker than usual, as if the shadows wanted to hide something. Elias followed the faint sound, his lantern light swinging from tree to tree. Then he saw her, lying half buried in the frost, her small body trembling, her glowing skin marking her as something not of this world. His breath caught. His first thought was fear. This was no ordinary child. But then he looked closer and he saw her eyes half open, filled with pain and silent pleading. She was not a monster. She was just a dying child. Elias knelt down. The alien girl's breathing was shallow, her lips cracked and her hands shook as if she was fighting to stay alive. He could see the strange marks glowing across her skin, shifting slowly like moving rivers of light. He did not understand what she was or why she was here. All he knew was that she had been abandoned, and if he left her too, she would not see the morning. For a long moment, Elias stood frozen. The stories of the villagers echoed in his mind. They would call him a fool, perhaps even curse him if they knew he had touched her. Yet his heart spoke louder than their fear. With gentle hands, he lifted the girl into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile like a bird with broken wings. She shivered against him, and he wrapped his blanket around her small frame. The journey back to his house felt endless. Every step through the forest was heavy with risk. What if someone saw him? What if this creature brought danger to them all? The questions followed him, but he pushed them aside. He could not abandon her, not while she still breathed. When he reached his door, Elias hurried inside and laid the girl near the fire. The warmth touched her skin and her trembling slowed, but her eyes remained closed. He boiled water, soaked cloth, and carefully cleaned the dirt from her face. Her features were strange yet delicate, her hair soft and silver, her ears slightly pointed, and her skin shimmering faintly like starlight. She looked almost human, yet clearly not. Hours passed. Elias fed her spoonfuls of warm broth, though most spilled from her lips. Still, some reached her, and little by little her breathing grew steadier. Her hands gripped the edge of the blanket as if she clung to life itself. At one point, her eyes flickered open. For the first time, she looked at him. Her gaze was deep, glowing faintly with light that seemed older than her small years. She tried to speak, but only a broken sound escaped. Elias pressed a finger to his lips gently, whispering, "Rest, child. You are safe now." For a second, her lips moved again. He thought he heard a word, though it was strange and soft. Protector. The fire crackled, filling the silence, and Elias felt a weight in his chest. He had no idea who this child was, no idea what danger might follow her, but in that moment none of it mattered. All he knew was that she had been left to die, and he would not let that happen. Outside, the wind grew louder, carrying with it an echo from the sky. Somewhere far above, hidden beyond the clouds, machines stirred, watching, waiting. The child was not forgotten, and Elias, though he did not know it yet, had just changed not only her fate, but the fate of two worlds. The night passed slowly. Elias did not sleep. He sat near the fire, watching the small alien child wrapped in his old blanket. Her breathing was shallow, but it was steady now. Every few minutes her skin glowed faintly, the strange marks across her arms and neck shining like living lines of light. Elias could not look away. They were beautiful, but also unsettling, moving as though they had a will of their own. At dawn, the village bell rang, calling people to the square. Elias thought about going, but his eyes kept returning to the girl. She stirred in her sleep, whispering in a language he did not understand. The words were soft, like fragments of a dream, but when he leaned closer, he thought one word sounded almost human. Home. Elias's heart tightened. Whoever she was, wherever she came from, she was only a child longing for safety. He brushed her silver hair back from her face. For the first time, he noticed a mark just above her collarbone. It glowed brighter than the rest, shaped almost like a star. The sight filled him with both wonder and unease. Was it a birthmark? Or a symbol of something greater? By mid-morning, she opened her eyes again. They shone softly, not like human eyes, but like twin lanterns filled with distant light. She looked around the room, confused and frightened. Elias raised his hand slowly, showing her he meant no harm. "You are safe," he said gently. "No one will hurt you here." She tried to sit up, but her weak body betrayed her. Elias helped her lean against a pillow. Her lips parted, and she spoke a broken sentence, mixing human words with strange sounds. Not leave me," Elias nodded. "I will not leave you, child." She seemed to relax, but then her hand moved to the mark on her chest. Her fingers pressed against it, and the glow brightened. Elias felt a sudden warmth in the room, as if the fire had flared without wood. His breath caught in his throat. Whatever she carried inside her, it was not ordinary. That afternoon, a knock came at Elias's door. He quickly covered the girl with blankets and went to open it. On the other side stood two men from the village. Their eyes were sharp with suspicion. "Elias," one said, "we saw your light in the woods last night. Tell us, did you bring something home?" Elias's heart raced. He forced a calm smile. "Only firewood. Winter nights are colder now." The men exchanged a look, but they did not press further. "Be careful, old man. Strange things walk these forests. Do not invite curses into your house." With that warning, they left. Elias shut the door quickly, his hands trembling. He turned back to the girl, who now watched him with wide eyes. She had understood. Fear crossed her face, and she whispered, "Hunters, come." The word sent a chill down his spine. "Hunters?" he repeated. She nodded weakly. Then, with her small hand, she drew in the air. Ships falling from the sky, men with weapons, fire across the earth. Elias could barely believe it, but her frightened expression told him it was true. For hours, she tried to explain with gestures and scattered words. Her name was something soft, almost like Leora. She had been left behind by people who feared her power. The glowing marks on her skin were not sickness, but a sign of her bloodline. She was important, though too young to fully explain why. If the wrong ones found her, she would be used as a weapon. Elias listened, his chest heavy. He had once been a soldier in his youth, long before peace had come to the land. He had seen how leaders twisted power and how innocents suffered. Looking at the fragile girl before him, he knew one thing for certain. He could not hand her over, no matter who came. That evening, while she rested, Elias stepped outside to fetch more wood. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard it, a low hum, deep and metallic, coming from the skies. He looked up. The clouds glowed faintly red, as if something massive moved above them. His breath froze. Ships. Rushing back inside, he barred the door. The girl sat up suddenly, her eyes wide with fear. "They come," she whispered, her voice breaking. The star-shaped mark on her chest glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Elias knelt beside her. "Listen to me, child. You are not alone anymore. Whatever comes, I will protect you." She reached for his hand, her small fingers glowing faintly against his weathered skin. In her gaze, Elias saw both terror and trust. The ground trembled softly. Distant footsteps echoed from the edge of the village. Shadows moved under the trees. The hunters had arrived, and Elias knew the true battle for this child's fate was only beginning. Elias kept the girl hidden as night fell again. The hunters had passed through the village asking sharp questions, but no one had dared to admit they had seen anything unusual. Still, Elias knew they would return. His heart was heavy with fear, but when he looked at the fragile child lying by the fire, Courage rose inside him. He had lived a long life, but now, for the first time in years, he felt that life had a purpose. The girl, whose name he had learned was Leora, was slowly gaining strength. She drank warm broth and managed to eat small pieces of bread. Each time Elias offered her food, her glowing eyes softened with gratitude. She did not speak much, but when she did, her words grew clearer every day. Her voice was soft, almost musical, carrying a strange beauty. One evening, Elias sat near her, mending a torn blanket. Leora reached out, touching the needle and thread with fascination. She mimicked his movements, clumsy but eager. Elias chuckled, guiding her small hands. For a moment, they looked like a grandfather teaching his granddaughter. The firelight danced across their faces, and Elias felt something he had not felt in years. Family, but the bond was more than warmth and kindness. Strange things began to happen. When Elias grew tired and his old bones ached, Leora would place her hand on his arm. The glowing marks on her skin would flare, and the pain in his joints would ease. His breath became steadier, his strength a little brighter. He realized she was sharing her life force with him. At first, Elias was frightened. "Child, you must not waste your strength on me," he said. But Leora only shook her head and whispered, "Protector, strong." It was as if she believed his survival was tied to hers. Days passed and their bond grew. Leora began to tell him fragments of her story in broken words. She was not only a child of her people, she was the daughter of someone important, perhaps even royalty. The star-shaped mark on her chest was a sign of her bloodline. If she lived, her people would follow her. If she died, her people would fall into despair. Elias listened, trying to piece together the meaning. He could not imagine such weight on the shoulders of someone so small. Yet when she spoke, her voice carried a strength beyond her years. One night, while the wind howled outside, Elias taught her human words. He pointed to objects in his cottage: fire, bread, water, home. She repeated them, her voice uncertain but eager. When he pointed to himself, he said, "Elias." When he pointed to her, she whispered proudly, "Leora." Then she pointed to him again, her eyes glowing faintly. She said a word from her own tongue, soft and foreign, then translated it slowly, "Protector." Elias felt his throat tighten. In her heart, she had already chosen him as her guardian, but outside, danger was growing. Elias noticed more movement in the forest, shadows slipping between trees, strange lights at night, and the distant hum of ships above the clouds. The hunters were not giving up. They were searching, watching, waiting. One evening, as Elias gathered wood, he saw something chilling. Carved into the soil near his fence was a mark, a circle with a jagged line through it. He did not know its meaning, but he knew it was a warning. They were closing in. Inside the cottage, Leora sensed it too. She grew restless, her glowing marks brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. "They find me," she whispered. "Danger. Come." Elias sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her small shoulder. "Listen to me, child. You are not alone. As long as I breathe, no harm will touch you." Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned against him. For the first time, she said a full sentence in clear human words. "You, my family." The word struck Elias like a blade and a blessing at the same time. His heart ached, but it also burned with determination. He had lost his family long ago, yet here was a child who saw him as her own. He could not fail her. That night, sleep would not come. Elias sat awake, listening to every sound outside, the crack of branches, the rustle of leaves. Then he heard it, a faint metallic click, not from nature but from weapons. Shadows moved outside his window. The hunters were back. Leora woke suddenly, her eyes glowing bright, her star mark shining like fire. She clutched Elias's hand, whispering, "They come." Elias stood slowly, his old body trembling but his spirit unshaken. He reached for the rusty sword that had hung above his fireplace for years. His soldier days were long behind him, but tonight they were returning. "Stay hidden," he told Leora, guiding her toward the secret cellar he had dug years ago for storms. She resisted, but he pressed her gently down. "Trust me, I will not let them take you." Her glowing hand gripped his wrist, her fear pouring into him, but she finally nodded. The hunter's footsteps grew louder outside. Torches flickered against the window. Elias tightened his grip on the sword, his heart pounding like a drum. He knew he was only one old man, but he also knew something greater. He was no longer fighting for himself. He was fighting for the child who had called him family. And through that bond, he would find the strength to stand against the darkness. The night pressed heavy against the small wooden house. Outside, the forest was alive with sounds not of nature, boots on soil, the soft crackle of torches, the low murmur of men hunting. Elias could hear them through the thin walls. They were close, far too close. Inside, the fire had burned low. The shadows stretched long across the floor, swallowing every corner of the cottage. Leora sat trembling in the cellar, hidden beneath old planks and blankets. Her glowing marks flickered faintly, like stars trying not to be seen. Elias knelt above her, whispering, "Do not make a sound, child. Whatever happens, stay here." Her small hand clutched his wrist, her eyes glowing with tears. "Protect her," she whispered. The word was soft, but it carried a weight that gave Elias strength. He nodded once, lowered the lid, and stood. The knock came hard, shaking the door on its hinges. "Old man," a rough voice barked. "Open up!" Elias tightened his grip on the rusty sword he had taken from above the fireplace. His heart pounded, but his steps were steady as he moved to the door. He opened it slowly. 4 hunters stood outside, their faces lit by the glow of torches. They wore dark coats and carried weapons, strange rifles that hummed faintly with power Elias did not recognize. Their eyes were sharp, searching, hungry. One stepped forward. "We're looking for something," he said coldly. "A creature, small, not human. Some saw tracks leading here." Elias kept his expression calm. "I am only an old man. My house holds nothing but firewood and bread. You may search if you doubt me." The leader narrowed his eyes. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, the others following close. Their boots thudded against the floorboards, echoing through the small room. One of them kicked over a stool. Another shoved aside the blankets on the chair. Elias's grip on his sword tightened. His mind screamed to act, but he held himself still. If he struck first, he would doom them both. He needed time. He needed a chance. The hunters spread out, their torches throwing wild shadows across the walls. One of them stopped near the cellar door. His eyes narrowed. He bent down, pressing his hand against the wood. Elias's heart froze. The man smirked. "What's this? A hiding place?" Before Elias could answer, a faint glow slipped through the cracks of the cellar lid. Leora's marks had flared, betraying her fear. The hunter's eyes widened. "She's here," he shouted. In that instant, Elias moved. His old body surged with strength he had not felt in years. The rusty sword swung in his hand, striking the hunter across the arm. The man cried out, dropping his weapon. The others spun around, raising their rifles. "Get him!" The leader barked. The room erupted in chaos. Torches fell, flames licking at the floor. Elias fought like the soldier he once was. Every strike fueled not by rage, but by desperate love. His blade clashed with steel, his hands bleeding, his breath burning in his chest. But he was only one man. A rifle cracked and pain shot through his side. Elias staggered, falling against the wall. The hunters advanced, their eyes filled with triumph. Then the cellar burst open. Leora rose from the shadows, her small form glowing brighter than ever before. The star mark on her chest blazed like fire, her eyes shining like suns. She raised her hands, and a wave of light pulsed through the room. The hunters stumbled back, shielding their faces. Their weapons sparked, failing in the glow. Elias, though weak and bleeding, felt warmth wash over him. The pain dulled, his strength returning. "Enough!" Leora cried, her voice ringing like a bell. Though broken, though young, there was power in her words. The hunters froze, fear flashing across their faces. The leader snarled, "She's the one. Take her." But the villagers had gathered outside, drawn by the noise and the flames. They saw Elias bleeding, saw the child glowing with light, saw the hunters with weapons raised. And for the first time their fear began to break. One villager stepped forward holding a pitchfork. Another grabbed a heavy stick. Soon a dozen voices shouted, "Leave them!" The hunters hesitated. Their orders had not prepared them for this, a village ready to stand against them. The leader spat on the floor, his eyes burning with hate. "This isn't over." With a sharp gesture, he pulled his men back. Slowly the hunters retreated into the night, their torches fading into the trees. Silence fell. Elias collapsed to his knees, his sword slipping from his grasp. Leora rushed to him, pressing her glowing hands against his wound. Warmth spread through him, and though the cut remained, the bleeding slowed. "You, safe now," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias smiled weakly, placing his hand on her silver hair. You saved me, child. No, we saved each other. The villagers stood uncertain, their eyes wide with fear and wonder. They had seen the truth tonight. Not a monster, not a curse, but a child who shone with light and an old man who chose to protect her. Above them, the night sky burned faintly red. Ships moved behind the clouds, waiting, watching. The hunters would return. And when they did, the true fight for Leora's fate and for the fate of both their worlds would begin. But for now, Elias held her close. In the shadows of the night, a bond had been forged. Not of blood, not of race, but of love and courage, and that bond was stronger than fear. The night after the hunters left was quiet, but not peaceful. Smoke still curled from the burned corner of Elias's cottage, and the air carried the heavy scent of ash. The villagers had helped put out the fire, yet they lingered outside his home, whispering. Some looked afraid, others curious, and a few stared at Leora with open wonder. Inside, Elias rested in a chair by the fire. His side was bandaged, the pain sharp with every breath, but he refused to close his eyes. Across from him, Leora sat curled in a blanket, her silver hair glowing faintly in the firelight. She watched him, her eyes filled with guilt. "You hurt because of me," she whispered. Elias shook his head. His voice was rough but steady. "I hurt because men chose cruelty, not because of you. Don't carry their sins." Leora lowered her gaze. For a long time, silence filled the room, broken only by the crackling fire. Then she looked up, her glowing eyes steady. "You must know." "Truth?" Elias leaned forward, his heart tightening. "Tell me, child." She placed her hand on the mark at her chest. The star-shaped glow pulsed, and suddenly the room filled with a faint hum, as though the walls themselves had begun to breathe. The glow spread across her skin, lighting the strange rivers of light that traced her arms and neck. "My name," she said slowly, fighting with each word, "is Leora Valen, daughter of the High Matriarch." Elias's breath caught. "High Matriarch?" She nodded. "Leader of my people, the Illyrians, a race from beyond the stars." Her voice shook, but she pressed on. "Our people divided, some loyal to her, others feared her bloodline, feared me." She closed her eyes, remembering. "When I was born, the star mark showed. Prophecy says, a child with this mark will bring change, end wars, create peace. But those who hunger for power, they feared peace. They wanted control. So they left me behind, abandoned, hunted." Her small shoulders trembled, but her voice grew stronger. "If I die, they will rule. If I live, my people still have hope." Elias sat back, the weight of her words pressing into him. This was no ordinary child. She was not only alien, she was a symbol, a key to the future of her race. And those hunters, those ships in the sky, were not just searching for her. They were trying to erase the hope she carried. He looked at her, fragile and glowing, and felt both awe and sorrow. She was only a child, yet her fate carried the weight of entire worlds. Leora's eyes filled with tears. "I bring danger to you, to your people. If they find me here, they burn your village, kill your kind. I should go." Elias's jaw tightened. "No," she blinked, surprised. "You are a child," Elias said firmly. "A child should never be abandoned. Not by your people, not by mine. You will not go. Not while I live." Her lips trembled, and then, slowly, she smiled. A fragile, broken smile, but one filled with warmth. "Protector," she whispered again. That night, Elias dreamed for the first time in years. He saw visions. Leora grown tall, leading armies not of war but of peace. He saw alien ships landing not with fire but with gifts. He saw children, human and Illyrian, playing side by side under the same stars. And in all those visions, one truth remained. It had begun here, in his small cottage, with a choice to save a child. The next morning, the village gathered outside his door. Men, women, and children all whispering. Some demanded he send Leora away. Others argued she had saved him, that she had shown no violence. The air was thick with fear and confusion. Elias stepped outside, leaning on his cane. "Listen to me," he called, his voice firm. "This child is no curse. She is no demon. She is flesh and blood as we are. She bleeds, she suffers, she hopes. If you abandon her, you abandon your own humanity." The crowd murmured, uncertain, but a few heads nodded. A mother holding her child stepped forward. "She healed him," the woman said, pointing at Elias. "How can light be evil?" Still, others were not convinced. One man spat on the ground. "If we keep her, the hunters will return. They'll burn us all. Elias's eyes hardened. If we send her away, what do we become? Cowards, murderers of children? No, I would rather die with honor than live with that shame. His words struck deep. The crowd fell silent. For the first time, the village began to shift. Not fully, not all at once, but the seed of courage was planted. That evening, Leora stood by the window, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. She spoke softly. My mother once said, "The strongest walls are not stone or steel, they are hearts that choose love." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we will be your wall, child, and when they come, we will stand. Far above them, hidden in the crimson clouds, massive ships stirred. The hunters had failed. The ones who commanded them would not. The next strike would not be in shadows, it would come with fire. But in Elias's heart, fear was gone. He had heard the revelation. He knew who Leora truly was, and he knew the fate of an alien race now rested not in armies or weapons, but in the bond between a dying child and an old man who refused to let her go. The days that followed Leora's revelation felt heavy, like the air itself carried a warning. The villagers whispered constantly. Some were afraid, others hopeful, but all of them knew one thing. The hunters would return, and when they did, they would not come with only torches and threats. They would come with fire and blood. Elias could feel it in his bones. He had lived long enough to recognize the silence before a storm. His cottage was repaired only in part, the scars of the last attack still visible on the walls. Yet inside, Leora's light had never shone brighter. She spent her days helping him, learning human words and showing kindness to the villagers who dared approach. Children were the first to warm to her. They saw no demon, no danger, only a girl with silver hair and glowing eyes who smiled shyly and healed a cut with the touch of her hand. Slowly, a few mothers began to trust her as well. They saw their children laugh with her, and they began to see her not as a curse but as a miracle. But fear never left everyone. A few men warned Elias again and again, "If you keep her here, you will bring death on us all." Elias's answer was always the same. "If death comes, let it come for me first." But she stays. One cold evening, the warning became reality. A sound filled the sky, not the hum of distant ships, but the roar of engines tearing through clouds. The villagers rushed into the square, pointing upward in terror. Through the red clouds, dark shapes descended, ships with sharp wings glowing with deadly fire. The hunters had returned. This time they did not hide. They marched into the village with weapons raised, armored in black steel that shimmered with alien energy. Their leader stepped forward, his eyes burning with hate. "Give us the child," he demanded, his voice echoing like thunder. "Do it now or this place will burn." The villagers trembled. Mothers clutched their children. Men gripped pitchforks and axes, but their hands shook. Fear threatened to swallow them whole. Elias stepped forward, his cane steady, his voice firm. "She is no prisoner. She is under my protection. If you want her, you'll have to take her over my body." Leora stood behind him, her small frame glowing faintly. Her voice rang clear. "I am not your weapon. I will not return to chains." The hunters laughed, cruel and sharp. Their leader raised his weapon, pointing it at Elias. "Then you die first, old man." Before he could fire, a stone flew through the air, striking him across the face. The villagers gasped. A young boy stood near the well, trembling but defiant. "Leave him alone," the boy shouted. Something broke inside the crowd. Fear turned to anger. One by one, villagers stepped forward, men with tools, women with torches, children clutching stones. They formed a wall around Elias and Leora, their voices rising together. "Leave them!" The hunters hesitated. This was no longer one old man standing against them. It was an entire village. Elias felt pride swell in his chest. For so long, these people had hidden behind fear, but now they chose courage. They chose humanity. The hunters snarled and raised their weapons. The first shot burned through the air, striking the ground near the villagers. Screams filled the square. But Elias did not flinch. He raised his rusty sword, his voice strong. "Hold the line." The battle began. The villagers fought with everything they had: pitchforks, axes, stones, fire. The hunters were stronger, faster, but the villagers had something greater: unity. And in the center of it all stood Leora, her star mark blazing brighter than ever before. She lifted her hands, and a wave of light burst across the square. Weapons sparked and failed, armor cracked, shadows scattered. The hunters staggered, blinded by her glow. The villagers pressed forward, striking with all their strength. Elias fought too, his sword clashing against steel. Pain seared through his body, but he did not stop. Every swing carried years of rage. Every strike carried the love he felt for the child who had given him purpose again. At last the hunters began to falter. Their leader stumbled back, his weapon broken, his men scattered. He stared at Leora, his face twisted with fury. "You cannot win," he spat. "Even if you survive tonight, the ones above will come. They will burn this world to ash." Leora's voice rang like a bell, clear and defiant. "Then let them see what light can do." She raised her arms, and the star mark on her chest flared like a rising sun. The glow swept through the village, through the trees, into the very skies. For a moment the darkness was gone. The hunters fell to their knees, covering their eyes, their fear finally breaking through. The villagers cheered, their voices rising into the night. For the first time they believed not in curses but in hope. The hunters fled, retreating to their ships. The roar of engines filled the sky once more, and then silence. Exhausted, Leora collapsed. Elias caught her in his arms, holding her close. Her glow dimmed, but her breathing was steady. She had poured everything into saving them, and she had succeeded. The villagers gathered around, faces lit with awe. No one doubted anymore. The alien child was not a curse. She was their hope. Elias looked at them all, his voice steady though his body shook. "She is under my protection. Under our protection. And together we will not let her fall." The night was quiet once more, but Elias knew this was not the end. The hunters would return and greater threats would follow. Yet he also knew something stronger. This village had chosen to stand. And as long as they stood together, no storm could break them. The village had never known such silence. After the hunters fled, only the crackle of torches and the labored breaths of tired villagers filled the air. The square, once a place of fear, now glowed with something new. Pride. They had fought together. They had stood together. And because of that, they had won the night. But victory felt fragile. Elias knew this was not the end. He stood in the center of the square, his sword broken, his clothes torn, his side still aching from wounds. Beside him, Leora lay in his arms, exhausted, her glow faint but steady. She had saved them all, but at what cost? The villagers gathered, their faces lit by firelight. Some whispered prayers, others wept openly. But all looked to Elias for guidance. He was no leader, no chief. But tonight he was the man who had stood between them and death. "We cannot fool ourselves," Elias said, his voice carrying through the night. "The hunters will return stronger, and they will not come alone. But we cannot live in fear anymore. We saw the truth tonight. This child is no curse. She is hope, and if we protect her, we protect more than our village. We protect the future." A murmur spread through the crowd. Slowly heads nodded. Farmers, mothers, children, all looked at Leora and saw not a burden but a light worth guarding. As dawn broke, Elias carried Leora back to his cottage. She woke briefly, her voice weak but steady. "You stood together," she whispered. "My people will see." "What do you mean?" Elias asked softly, but she had already fallen back into sleep. That day, the sky changed. Clouds darkened and a low hum filled the air. Villagers looked up, fear clutching their hearts. Massive shapes broke through the sky, ships larger than mountains, their hulls glowing with alien fire. They did not move like hunters. They moved like an army. The ground shook as the ships descended. Villagers grabbed their children, some ready to run, others frozen in terror. Elias stood tall at the edge of the square, his heart pounding. He had faced soldiers before, but never this. From the largest ship, a beam of light fell to the earth. Out of it stepped figures tall and regal, clad in silver armor that shimmered like moonlight. At their center walked a woman with eyes that blazed like stars and hair that flowed like liquid silver. Her presence alone silenced the village. "Leora?" she called, her voice echoing in every heart. Elias brought the child forward, weak but awake now. When she saw the woman, her eyes filled with tears. "Mother," she whispered. Gasps rose from the villagers. The High Matriarch herself had come. She knelt, gathering Leora into her arms. For a moment, all the power and fire of her presence melted into simple love. "My daughter," she said, her voice trembling. "You live." Elias stepped back, his chest tight. He understood now. This was why Leora mattered so much. She was not only a child, not only hope. She was the heir of a people who could shape the galaxy. The matriarch rose, turning her gaze on Elias. Her eyes were piercing, yet full of gratitude. "You saved her," she said simply. "You saved the blood of Illyria." Elias bowed his head. "I did what anyone should have done. She is a child. She deserves life." But the matriarch shook her head. "No, many would have left her. Many would have chosen fear. You chose love. And because of that, you changed everything." The villagers trembled as alien warriors spread across the square, but the matriarch raised her hand. "Do not fear. We are not here to harm you. We came because of her signal. A light called us from the skies. And what we found was more than our child. We found humanity." She looked at Elias again. "You showed us who you are. You did not turn away. You stood when others would have fallen. That is strength. That is honor. My people will not forget." For the first time, the villagers felt awe instead of fear. They saw themselves not as prey, not as victims, but as allies in something far greater. Elias felt tears sting his eyes. He looked down at Leora, who now held her mother's hand but still reached for his. "Protect her," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with love. The matriarch smiled gently. "Protect her indeed. From this day forward you are bound to our people. Your kindness has written a new path." The ships lifted again, their engines roaring like thunder. But they did not bring destruction. They brought promise. For as they rose into the sky, the matriarch's voice carried one last message. The fate of Illyria has changed, and so too has the fate of Earth. As silence returned, Elias stood among his people, weary but proud. He had been only an old man, forgotten and alone. But by saving one abandoned child, he had forged a bond between worlds. And from that bond a future was born, one that would forever change humanity, Illyria, and the stars themselves.